Par contre, si vous regardez le YouTube, il faut le regarder dans une autre fenêtre et il faut couper le son. Là. C'est parti, hein. C'est en direct.
Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be with you today. So this is Rudy speaking, and this is the live session for Time to Reorganize, the Coursera MOOC offered by HEC. So today we'll cover a series of issues. The first one will give you some elements about the number of participants to this MOOC. We'll also discuss some of maybe problems that you had with questions in the quiz. Especially two questions were a bit problematic, and I will explain to you what happened. Maybe there was a wrong formulation or some problems with the answers. We also received several questions on the Facebook page, as well as directly by email. And actually, today with us we have Vanessa and Romain, part of the TTR team, and Francis as well. So if you have questions as I speak, please just send them, and Romain will ask them as I speak, and so we'll be able actually to develop this ongoing discussion. So let's move to the presentation of the participants. So far, we had 22,000 learners who joined the movement since last year, so that's super great. It's a very successful MOOC. So far, too, 98% like the content, which means that the 2% forgot to like it, I guess. In terms of the breakdown, geographical breakdown, you see that 45% are from Europe, 20% from North America, 18% from Asia, more male than female participants, and let's say 30% are students, and the others are not. So this is who you are. Then let's move to Vanessa, if you can pass the next slide. Let's move to the quiz. So we have two questions here that raise some issues. So the first one was about two NGOs, Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders, and the question was, Red Cross always aims at working hand in hand with the different political organizations present in the field, while Doctors Without Borders does not. The different options you had were the following. This is because they share different logics of action. This is because despite sharing the same logic of action, organizations define their ends and means differently. This is because Red Cross looks for financial support, or this is because Doctors Without Borders is older than Red Cross. So you can see that actually the first attempt frequency as the second one, the last attempt frequency, gave the first answer as the right answer. Actually, it was not this one. It was the second answer that was correct, the second option. And why is this so? Because from an ergology point of view, we'd say that actually both NGOs share the same logic of action, which is to try to promote the social good, also community logic, helping people in need. And it's in the means and ways that they perform their mission that they differ. So basically, it was a way just to offer two organizations with the same logic of action. It's not public logic, for instance, or market logic, or family logic. It's here a different logic toward communities or toward humanity in general. But the difference is that some are more connected to the local governments, whereas the other is less so connected with the local governments, and therefore it's a difference in their ends and means rather than a difference in logic. So I hope it's clearer now. So the second question from the quiz was, Vanessa, if you can show the question, yes, was the following. When various organizations work in the same area and follow different logics of action, you can say that. And you see that here, well, there were several right, if I can say this, answers, good options. And one that was forgotten, most likely, was the third one. So let's go over the first two first. So they do not perceive the issue at hand the same way. Well, that's normal because they do not have the same logic of action. They do not act the same way, also because each organization sharing the same logic of action or with different logic of action, even more so, actually act differently. They define their different strategies. So these two answers were easy. And you see that in the percentages, 9 out of 10 people actually did answer this correctly. Whereas the third one, I think, is also quite interesting. Was that they're in competition with one another here. That what we were trying to say, that when you are in the same area, and so here maybe it's the area that was not, let's say, precise enough that made you not really answer the third option. We could have said here in the same, if I say the same industry, or if I say the same business area, or the same mission or something like that, probably this would have prompted the third answer more. So they are in competition with one another. And so the idea here is that organizations are in competition because they try to address the same problems, and they may come from different logics of action. Family, again, it can be state agency, it could be for profit, of course, and sometimes they are not considered as being really in competition because they have different logics of action. Well, what we would say is that actually, well, they are, because they need the same resources. It can be competencies, it can be some assets, and they try to solve the same problem, the same issue, to address it the best way they can. And at the end, maybe it will be the state agency that will dominate for a given problem, and for another problem it will be, I don't know, a community-based organization or a for-profit organization, following an organization following a for-profit logic of action that will survive, or that will find the best solution to the problem. So I hope that this is clearer now. So let's move to the next session. Oh yeah, it's a reminder. So please don't forget to evaluate your peers. You know that now you have been assigned with Coursera superb system, technical system, to evaluate some assignment, some description of a situation by the community. So please don't forget to evaluate your peers. You have agreed to do that, and you need to evaluate 5 of these elements. So then we received some questions, and so on the Facebook we picked 2 questions. So a question from Sarah Room Robinson. So she asked, what is the best way to maximize the benefits of organizations? So the way I understand the question is actually, when is it that the organizations do perform the better? Well, to address this question, I would say that I would say that there is no optimal way in general. There are certainly optimal ways per logic. So the best way, so if you try to impose, for instance, a very financial or for-profit logic of action in an organization that would be, let's say, geared toward the community. If you can think of, I don't know, art museums or some, educational schooling services and stuff. I think that you may enter in, you may create some conflicts and some tensions within the organization, and probably you will not maximize, to cite Sarah, to quote Sarah, maximize the benefits of the organization. So I would say, for me, there are different ways, and this is called management, actually, to adjust the means and the processes within organization, depending on the logic that they are pursuing. Of course, if the logic you're pursuing is becoming illegitimate in the environment, well, you could be optimizing, in a sense, the management of your organization, but in a logic that is losing ground. And so, at the societal level, you probably are not maximizing the welfare of the entire population. We have another question from Pam Santos. Rudy was saying it's hard to change the logic of organizations. On the other hand, whenever there is a change in organizational leadership, there is a lot of expectation and second guessing on what the new leader will change. How does it take into account the capacity for directional impulse by a new leader? So I think that that connects to another question we received by email. So if we can move to the next slide, because we actually co-located the two questions next to each other, which was a question received by email, which was, I wonder whether some individuals have more influence on organization and its logic of actions, CEO, board of directors, and how this is viewed by the prism of ecology. I think that here what is very interesting is the question of individual influence on organizations. So, and I would say that on average, so I know that you can find some exceptional leaders who actually create organizations, who actually change the course of actions within organizations so dramatically. But I would say that on average, it's very difficult to change the logic of action that an organization is following. So these cases are quite exceptional, and of course they are. Some of them are very known and recognized, but the vast majority of leaders do not succeed in changing the logics of actions when the organizations are relatively old. It's very difficult to change the processes, the identities of individuals, the objectives, the missions, and so you have to do this progressively to change the structure of the organization, to recreate sub-organizations kind of within the main organization, etc. So it's very, very difficult. But it's possible, and so this probably makes even more interesting the modules and MOOCs that you can find on leadership, because it takes a lot of energy, charisma, political savviness just to make these changes happen. Another question we received was from EO. So I am interested in the mechanism by which organizations deal with conflicts of interest. Obvious sources of such conflict include profit-seeking at the expense of employees or environment, or desire to make a scientific discovery regardless of ethical considerations. In the case of medical research, organizational processes have evolved to protect the rights of human and animal, for that matter, subjects. In the case of profit versus environmental or social concerns, how can organizations avoid such conflicts of interest? Well, I would say here I would separate two things. The first one is the case of conflict of interests, which is related to a given individual or person, versus the conflict of logic or logic conflict, which is more organizational. So when you are oil producer or an energy company, you are facing this dual challenge of actually adjusting, your logic for profit, selling more cubic meters if you sell gas, or more barrels if you sell oil, to actually render service, which would be just to help your consumers reduce the quantities of oil or gas that they are buying. So, which is a bit schizophrenic in a sense. So, conflict of interest goes back to each individual's values, notions, sense of responsibility, not to put yourself at the same time as judging something and benefiting from your judgment, for instance. Whereas conflict of logics, here it's a broader phenomenon that is super interesting per se, which is how do organizations actually migrate from one dominant logic to another one. As I said, the previous question, this is very, very difficult to do, and creates lots of, well, disorganized worlds for the people who are within the organization, for their employees, therefore, for their clients sometimes, and their investors, etc. So another question, which is interesting. So the next two questions, actually, one is about organization within organization. If you imagine a multinational corporation with lots of sub-entities, subsidiaries, etc., and here again it could be not that the two logics conflict with each other frontally, but that actually there is one entity who, because it was recently acquired, for instance, who has a logic of action toward, for instance, non-profit or less profit markets, when Ben & Jerry was acquired by Unilever, for instance, to give an example. So therefore, an entity that has a certain type of logic within an organization that has a different logic. And here, it's not, therefore, a confrontational conflict of logics, but it's more one logic embedded in another dominant logic. So here it puts the managers of these entities in a very difficult situation, either as trying to convert the dominant logic orders to the new logic, or just to keep and maintain their own identity separate from the dominant logic. But in any case, it's a situation that is really not comfortable for the people in the entity. The way this situation can evolve depends on, I would say, the relative performance of the two entities. The dominant one, whether its logic is still, let's say, dominant in the market, in the public space, and the entity itself, the sub-entity, the subsidiary, for instance. So you can imagine that, for instance, a business, let's take the example of a firm with these two different entities, the big one dominant that is losing ground, and an entity that they just acquired that has a different logic. So if the proven efficiency or market value of the sub-entity increases much faster than the dominant entity itself, or if the dominant entity is fading away, whereas the smaller entity becomes more and more legitimate and more successful, you can see here a mechanism through which some organizations can change logics, meaning momentum from a minority logic from within the organization that overtakes the organization itself. And then there is another question, which is, hey, more and more actually employees actually are self-employed or are their own owners, kind of, or lots of entrepreneurs have very small organizations. And so the question is, hey, how are individuals affiliated to those organizations less or more empowered to achieve their own goals compared to individuals part of bigger organizations? Aren't organizations just artificially created entities in which individuals play a big role embedding their own values? So I kind of like this question because I think it's a fundamental question. that pushes us to think further the definition of our own identities. I mean, later in the MOOC, I will comment on who are we as individuals. My opinion, because here I would say it's more an opinion than a scientific judgment. I would say my opinion is that despite the fact that self-employees or let's say their own managers, self-employed professionals, define their identities through this freedom, this liberty they have to act and contract as much as they want. They participate to, let's say, a broader social movement or identity movement that needs, in a way or another, to be represented in the society at large. So that means that they won't just be their own employees or employers. They will also, at a point in time, if they want to actually wait on the society, regroup themselves, through different forms: a social movement, a union, a light organization, and this is actually supra or super organization that will speak for them, to them. So my opinion is that take it the way you want, but for me the identity of individuals is dependent on the organization to which they belong. Even if you are self-employed, you will refer to self-employability as a characteristics of an organizations, which would be the union, the movements to which you participate to, and this is what will define you as an individual. I'm just throwing this for discussion. And here it's a question from MD. So you mentioned different types of capitalism based on different types of logic, so family, capitalism, etc. Where do you take this division on personal, family, etc., capitalism? Well, it's in one of the readings. So I mean, there are several sociologists that define society from different what they call orders or subsectors. I mean, you have different terminology, and the number of these, let's say, sectors is not infinite. I mean, we can distinguish 7 most common numbering or let's say types of sectors that are used in organizational sociology, economic sociology, or orgology is 7, and it's in the reading by Patricia Thornton, Willie Ocasio, and Mike Lonsbury that I have put in the reading session. So it's not, it's an example, but I think you could probably add some orders, but you will face the case that actually you have listed all the different possibilities of logics quite soon. Then I think that we have a question from Maximilian Romain.
Hi, Rodolphe. Yes, so we have a question from Maximilian Klein. So you illustrated the evolution from the organization of production to the production of organizations in the first week, actually. What, from your point of view, will be the next evolutionary step?
Yes, so I mean, we clearly saw this change of organization of production to the production of organizations. So I think that the next stage, and I won't be very original in this, relates to the disruption that is offered by digital technologies, and I think that this connects nicely as well to the former question about self-employment and the fact that the organizations that we know already, and we will know more and more, will be actually far less definitional in terms of the space where you work, the type of tasks that you perform. It will be much more, let's say, mission-based, result-based, located in different parts. And so that means that I think that you will have more power for the organizations that will regroup, let's call it them professionals, for instance. So I think that the professions logic will take some more power, so that you would have organizations that will regroup certain types of competencies from certain types of individuals. and that because the actually the individuals need these organizations to self-identify, define the solutions to the problems, improve on the solutions, etc. I think that despite the fact that you will observe this disaggregation, these individualizations perhaps of the organizations, you will find also a reorganization of these individuals into different groups, different organizations that will try to weight some power. So around professions, maybe around unions, different types of unions that will defend some communities, local communities as well. I mean, so some more locally defined organizations. There is also a question from Marius.
Yeah, so we have another question from Marius Geker. So, hello, Professor Duran. You just gave the example of Ben and Jerry's. Is it important for employees and other stakeholders that a company has one sole dominant logic of actions, which they can relate to?
I would say yes. I think that there is demands from the stakeholders, especially if the organization is a for-profit, because in that case you have the mechanism of let's say market sanctions and expectations from the markets, and in that case we know that the markets prefer firms to be focused on, let's say, one dominant business. We know that they pursue one main goal, and that you have what we call a diversification penalty, for instance, or discount, what financial markets call diversification discount. Therefore, it means that to be able to respond to these market expectations, you need to have one dominant logic, or there's a preference for having one clear dominant logic. And that's also why it's difficult for some firms that are quoted in stock markets to pursue, let's say, CSR objectives, corporate social responsibility, in terms of environmental protection, in terms of social diversity, etc., because it does not belong directly to their dominant logic of action, and therefore you have lots of power again that counter power against the retention of different types of criteria, such as I don't know, negative ecological footprint, for instance, or women-men parity in decision processes or in salaries, or we can name other objectives. Oh, actually, Pam Santos also actually reacted to the discussion today.
Yeah, so we have another question from Pam, actually. So in the World Food article, it struck me that there was a poverty of organization in the public space. Does the orgology framework cover the creation or ensuring of a plurality of organizations?
Yes, actually, yeah. I mean, the way we're trying to think orgology is actually a way to understand why do organization forms emerge, and why do they survive. So if you take actually some social movements that try, so for instance, we are the 99%, okay? This is a social movement, but it didn't have, so it had an impact for sure, but at the same time do not have any kind of organization that can relay the messages, which is a very strong message, by the way. Whereas in Spain, you could see that Podemos, for instance, became kind of a political organization that went to the elections and was very successful into this. So you have different situations. This is because of the different public spaces, and here orgology will relate to political science, for instance, try to explain how is this public space populated or not by different types of organizations pursuing different type of organizational logics. So if you take only an economic point of view, I think that you restrict very dramatically the idea of why do organizations emerge. They emerge because they have an economic interest. I think it's not completely true. I mean, it's probably true, but it's not just that. If you take a sociology, sociological perspective on this, you would say, okay, so you have the masses that congregate and respond violently or not to some domination structures. Say, well, fine, but at the same time, this does not capture all the reality either. So I think what we need to understand why some logics of action become more prevalent at certain point in time in certain spaces, countries. I know that we have people listening to us from Asia, from India, from Africa, and so maybe when I say public space or public sphere, I mean they do not have the same representations as we may have in North America, and within North America, Canada versus the US, clearly different, and in Europe, which is, I mentioned Spain, but if you think Germany, here again you have some national conditions that make the public spaces different, and therefore the organization that can emanate different. What is very interesting to, I think, to understand is that actually because they have different logics of actions, what will be prevalent in one public space will be different in another one. The legitimacy will not be the same. The means that you will have and the resources that you will employ, the material resources, the human competency that you will put together will not give the same results in different public spaces. Despite the intentions, despite the goodwill, despite all the energy that some individuals will put in these efforts. It's because it's the organizational level, it's because it's the logic of actions that is legitimate or not in one industry, in one country, in one public space, that gives the credit for this organization to operate, and then it deploys its means and resources, and within the same logic of action, remember Doctors Without Borders versus Red Cross, for instance, same logic of action but different means, so will give different results. So I hope I answered Pam questions here. Shall we go on? I would like to thank all these people actually for asking this very interesting question. I hope I'm making things clearer for everybody with my answers. So what is the next slide now, Vanessa? I think it's about to conclude now with the week number 3. So I don't have the slide control on my screen. So Romain, will you comment on the slide, because I cannot?
All right. So I mean, just so the week 3 I just started basically this week. So you will hear about mainly competitions and how competition between organizations, the logic of competition and performance tests can affect organizations. So this is a topic mainly discussed in week 3. You will also have to answer some our article quizzes. Actually, Pam Santos made a reference to some article quizzes that you will discuss during next week. And so don't forget to assess your peers as per the peer assessments. And then Rodolphe, you'll be leading another live session on February 10, I think. So, and that's about it.
Wonderful. And thank you again, everybody, for listening to this or watching this later. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.